Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The InEVitable. This is MotorTrend's podcast where we talk about the future of the automobile. As always, I am joined by Ed Lowe, and we're going to be talking about electric cars, cars that drive themselves. Also, if we're driving electric cars, how are we charging them? And I'm super excited, maybe a little too excited, about today's guest.
Yeah, hold back. I feel like you're going to leap across the table.
Keep your powder dry.
Yeah, you're going to leap across the table and really get into the face of this guy. And he's not actually probably the guy we necessarily want to strangle.
But I think he can be a symbol. He can represent all my frustration with charging.
We have the chief commercial officer of EVgo. His name is Jonathan Levy, and has very politely accepted our request to be on the show and speak on behalf of all EV charging infrastructure around the globe and the universe.
That's right.
Explain all the problems that we've had, from the trash nearby, the lack of bathrooms, the safety, what happens when it rains.
So in other words, a pile of raw meat is coming into the lion's den.
Right.
And if I can steal a line from, turns out we're both friends of Evan from LA in a minute. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
The guy from EVgo, Jonathan Levy. Welcome to The InEVitable.
Thanks for having me.
Boy, do we got some questions for you. Oh, man. Oh, man.
I mean, you set this up as a firing squad, 2-on-1, so I'm braced.
Well,
let's be clear. We actually, in terms of EV charging network brands, I don't think that we have that much. We don't have as big an axe to grind with EVgo as we do with some of your competitors. Would you say?
There's one specific one that also starts with an E that I have a personal vendetta against.
So, but your problem is we're going to ask you to speak on behalf of all of them and EVs in general and the universe and the industry that we're.
But let's back it up a little bit.
Oh, look at you! Wanting to back up.
I'm pulling it Ed Low.
Right.
Where's your bell, by the way?
Oh shoot! Hang on.
So okay.
So you worried about the bell?
No, not at all.
Right.
You're the COO.
CCO.
Sorry, CCO. And so what is?
I don't want Dennis to be feeling like I'm coming for him.
Sorry, CCO. Sorry.
Chief Commercial Officer.
Yes.
Right.
So,
how did you get there?
That's an interesting question because it's not a direct answer. So look, I think obviously you all are car guys and talk to a lot of car guys. My path is a slightly more circuitous route. I was a big nerd in many ways, but a government nerd, right? My dad would come home when I was a kid, and he'd have an "I voted today" sticker that his secretary got him because he didn't want to bother voting, and I would start pressing him on, well, where was the polling place? And he's like, you're 8. Why do you know that? And so I always knew I wanted to work in government. And so I graduated early from college, moved to D.C., got a job on the Hill, working for Rahm Emanuel, went into the Obama administration. And when you're in a lot of these jobs, you have to become a bit of an expert in a lot of things. And so I started getting really into energy amongst other things in my portfolio. Wrote a bill on alternative fuel vehicles. This is way too long of an answer for your question.
No. This is a wonderful answer.
But then eventually, when Rahm became White House Chief of Staff, I had to choose, where do I stay on the Hill? Do I go into the administration? Do I go into the private sector?
And what year did he become Chief of Staff?
2009.
Okay, so
Barack Obama's first term.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was one of those things where.
So you worked for Rahm before?
I worked for Rahm on the Hill.
I'm sorry.
So I was working for him when he was a member of Congress.
I see.
I was writing legislation, briefing memos, speeches, all that good stuff, which was hugely one of the lessons you learn in D.C. D.C. is run by 20 and 30-year-olds. It's great because you have these opportunities, but occasionally you have these moments that are like, that's scary.
Except when it comes to apparently emails and BlackBerries and iPhones and the Congress. Well, I guess that's why, right?
The
Congress.
The staff is all 20 and 30.
Right, and they're the ones sending the emails, and that's why whatever Feinstein or whoever doesn't have an email address or know how to send one or whatever they say.
Or the more recent example is people got really excited about the Senate hearings with on the Ticketmaster thing,
right,
where you had all these senators and others quoting Taylor Swift lyrics.
Right.
It's like that's because there are a lot of 20 and 30-somethings writing talking points.
Right. They thought it's cute.
So how long were you with Emanuel before Obama came to office?
So I worked for Rahm for about 5 years.
Oh, so you were in D.C. for a while.
Yeah, I was in D.C. from 2004 to 2017.
So it's like 6 years. Okay,
so it was 5 years with Rahm, 6 in the Obama administration, and then 2
75
commuting.
in dog years.
Yeah,
it ages doesn't. That's a grind, right?
When I went to D.C., I thought I was only going to be there for 2 years, like everybody else. And one of my colleagues said, D.C. is like grad school. You're going to come here. Everybody's going to think they're smarter than they are. You're going to learn a lot. You're not going to make any money. Everything's going to be under construction, and you're going to have all these opportunities to go somewhere else when you're done. Which I thought was a really interesting frame of it.
Right.
But for me, working for Rahm, he was actually a really great boss because he's very, very smart, but he also pushes you to be better. And he has this great anticipatory sense where he had great business acumen as well as political acumen, and it let him kind of see things that other people didn't. We got to get ahead of this, got to get ahead of that. But so I had to work on this portfolio that was everything from campaign finance reform and appropriations to clean energy and transportation. Right. And so when he went into the White House, I had to figure out where to go. And so I interviewed at the EPA, I interviewed at DOE, and I really ended up liking the people and the remit at DOE.
Remit is
just the things that would be under, things I got to do, right? The DOE has 17 national labs, and it's this R&D agency that's an engine. If you think about,
they just created fusion, right?
Livermore,
yeah.
Ignition, yeah.
Wait, so hang on.
Yeah.
Where do you get tritium? Anyway, sorry.
Emory, which is in.
Do you want me to fill in or no?
Yeah, fill in.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right. So are you from Atlanta?
I'm from Chicago.
Oh.
So
okay. So hence the Rahm Emanuel connection.
I have two older sisters. My whole family's still back in the Chicago area, and I kind of flew the coop to go to college. And I knew that I wanted to get into government, and so I interned for Rahm in his district office in Chicago when I was still in college. And so then when I moved to D.C.,
you're part of the Chicago machine.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Let me ask you this: Did you ever meet Obama? Did you get to?
Yeah.
Did you get to work with him?
So when I was at DOE, it was during the Recovery Act. So the Department of Energy had some billions of dollars on top of regular appropriations to do all these clean energy deployments. And I was at the time the only political appointee doing congressional affairs at DOE for over a year, which meant that I had members of Congress calling my cell phone to yell at me and all this other work. And so one of my colleagues nominated me for a presidential recognition photo. Oh. And so I got to go have a one-on-one in the Oval with the president, very brief, and it's a series of these where you got like 5 people being recognized. They wait out in the hall talking to, and I happen to know his executive assistant at the time, Katie Johnson. So we were chatting, and then you get brought in, and it's just you, the president, and Pete Souza, the photographer.
Pete Souza, yeah, one of my favorite Instagram accounts. Yeah, Pete's great.
Yeah, and the president was the most intimidated I've been. Like I got asked this question the other day of like, do you get intimidated with big companies? And like, no, the most intimidating person I could have met, I met, and it was great. We had this lovely conversation on redistricting reform and politics, and it was, he's amazing. So it was a fantastic opportunity.
Oh, that's cool.
So so you did 5 years at Rahm Emanuel's office, and then you go to DOE, and you Deputy Assistant Secretary, Office of Congressional.
Very long title.
Yes.
Yep.
And then Senior Advisor, and that's 2 years. Senior Advisor to Deputy Secretary, and you are you graduated early, so you were 21, 25. You are probably 29 years old as a Senior Advisor.
Yeah, I was.
How does that work?
When I was the
DC.
When I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary, they told me I was the youngest Deputy Assistant Secretary at DOE history. Now, the department's only been around since 1977, but that was still a compliment.
Yes.
By how does it work? Did you mean did I know what the hell I was doing, or
maybe
which part?
Yes.
Like when I came into DOE, I wasn't hired as a DAS, but I proved myself very quickly. I did Senate confirmations for 13 nominees. Spent a lot of time doing all this Recovery Act work that we alluded to. Rahm taught me well on the hillside, and I got up to speed very quickly. I like to think of myself as a quick study, and made myself a key contributor, but with a great team. I mean, it was like a in the foxhole mentality with this great team with Rod and Missy, like Dan, all these great people. And Secretary Chu knew he needed to bring in different talent from a lot of different places.
John Chu.
Steve Chu.
Steve Chu.
Yeah.
Right.
So what was so like it's 2010, right? That Obama
so 2000
comes in.
The president was sworn in 2009. So I moved over in like April of 2009.
Okay. What was like when you guys at DOE spoke about EVs?
Mm-hmm.
What was this? What was the time frame like? What were you thinking back then?
Yeah,
do you remember?
Yeah, no, I do, because in 2009 it was what was out there, right? We were making the loan to Tesla, right? We were doing the program.
And were you involved with that?
No, I wasn't at the time. We were doing the ATVM stuff with Ford, right, and with Nissan for the Smyrna facility.
And the ATVM.
Sorry,
no. I know it. I'm just for
but the chairman of our board does the same thing. He's like, you're speaking too many acronyms,
right?
Which totally a bad DC trait that I have. It's the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program at DOE, and so during in 2008 going into 2009, obviously there was a lot going on with the auto industry. And so you end up having
that's an understatement. Wow,
you know,
Merritt Morris can tell you all about that.
There's my political training coming in.
Yeah,
but the concept being, like, if you look at what was out there in 2009, right? It was people getting excited about Tesla, people getting excited, but your options were fairly limited, right? It was your i3 and your Leaf, right?
Yeah. i3 was like a few years away.
Yeah,
it was like Leaf.
And I want to call you on that because I don't think anybody was, except for like really hardcore nerds, had either heard of Tesla or if they'd heard of it, were actually that excited about it because they didn't know about it. Back then,
that was the question. At DOE, what were we thinking? We were excited about the potential, right? And it was this concept of...
At that point, it was what? It was the Roadster with the batteries?
Right.
And you're like, oh, look at these guys.
Well, essentially, if you think about DOE's history, right, it came out of IRTA and AEC, and we don't need to get into all this history, but it was an R&D agency, right? And so a lot of what the program, the vehicles program at DOE was doing was how do you reduce the cost of the batteries? And so part of the excitement around Tesla was this is a really cool car that we know is going to be expensive, but if you get enough scale, you can get these innovations, you can bring down the cost of the chemistry can come down, you do all these things that can suddenly start to move the envelope. So it was this excitement of how do we get these things moving?
Okay. It's fascinating you say that because I think famously is the right word. We gave the Model S in 2000. It was the end of 2012. We gave it Car of the Year, and I remember...
It's 10 years on, decade, right?
Yeah, decade on. But but remember, we'd had that party in Manhattan.
Right.
Elon was there, Franz was there, the whole team was there. But they threw a party because we'd given them Car of the Year. And one of our judges is Chris Theodore. He was a head of R&D at Chrysler. Then he moved over to head of R&D at Ford. Really knows the car industry.
Right.
And I remember we're sitting there. I can't remember if it was like having dinner before the party. And he's leaning back, and he's like... I just can't make the math work. He's like, I love our decision. I love everything. Batteries are too expensive. I just can't. At the time, it was an $80,000 car. He's like, you can't make money. You can't make money selling this car for $80,000.
And my reply has always been, well, that's why it's not business case of the year. It's just car of the year.
That was my line, but yes.
But if you look at lithium-ion, if you look at the cost of the batteries from 2009 to 2015, it came down 600%. Right? I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but this cost curve reduction is what has enabled the shift we've had in the last 10 years.
If it wasn't for COVID, I mean, it would be under 100 kilowatts or $100 a kilowatt hour.
Well, okay.
So... It was just fascinating because, it was one of those things like, well, why did Tesla? I'm sure there's a lot of companies. Like we know, Coda, Zinger's company, they applied for it, and they were not given that whatever bridge loan or whatever kind of loan that was. But so why Tesla? Because it was a pretty historic decision by the Department of Energy to grant this one company.
And this was pre-Elon Tesla, right?
Well, so I wasn't in the room for these things, right?
No, it wasn't pre-Elon. It was the
2009.
It wasn't pre-Elon.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, if you think about it, it wasn't like it was just Tesla, right? You had
that's
Ford,
what I'm saying,
you had AT, you had. So I think a little bit of it from outside, having not been in the room for those decisions, was, hey, you've got the incumbents. It's really important that they're pushing, and so this Leaf facility in Tennessee, what's happening with Ford, what's happening with the others. And then also, what's going to happen with the new market entrants? And so I think that there's probably a little bit of a diversification thing there, but it's also just this exciting. Anytime there's new innovation, that's what DOE is there to support. It is primarily R&D focused, early technology readiness levels, and then only recently have they started to push the envelope on deployment, which is great. It's a great role for them, and I think Secretary Granholm's doing a great job with that. But so when you have new market entrants bringing new chemistries or new approaches, that's fascinating and something that DOE tends to support.
Okay. Before we go any further, though, I have to ask, because I'm trying to figure out what makes you tick on a lot of this.
Yeah.
Because energy is energy, policy is policy. It's also, oh my God, I'm getting a sense that your skill is sort of managing situations, moving things along. You might not. I mean, your degree is in political science and government, and you went to Oxford afterwards. You're a smart guy, but
that's not even afterwards. It's a long story, but it was
it was
just like a summer program that Emory does at Oxford that was fantastic.
Great.
I don't want to overstate my education. I'm not.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Zing. He's sandals shirts. Oh, I won't hit the bell. That's for something else. So you're a smart guy, but you're certainly not like you're not a physicist.
Correct.
Right? You like cars? You can't. You live in Chicago. Like they don't have cars there, right?
Yeah, you're thinking
it's
New
not
York.
horse and buggy.
They have cars in Chicago. Yes.
Not with the original wheels. See, I'm just kidding. That's a different thing entirely.
All right. So look, I think, Ed, it's an interesting question, right? Because I'm not a car guy the way that you guys are car guys. My dad both my parents actually are more car people than I am. My mom used to drag race. My dad bought a 72 Le Mans convertible when I was in high school, and so I got to drive something with a big old engine that was too much power for an 18-year-old. But that was kind of cool. But that was never my thing. My thing has been, as you just said, it's problem solving, and it's also a mission orientation, right? Like, why did I go work on the Hill? It was to try and make a difference. Why did I go into the Obama administration? Really impacting people's lives. And so when I left government, I went to an investment firm that was focused on sustainable real assets, right? Because it was, how can you get two missions? Can you get that mission of saving the planet and making money? In part, not just for my own benefit, because if we're not proving that you can make money saving the planet, not enough capital will go into saving the planet.
Right.
And so EVgo is the next evolution of that, of, hey, deploying fast charging to enable mass adoption. That's a critical way. Transportation is the plurality of emissions in the U.S. How are we going to solve climate change? We're going to have to electrify everything, and transportation's a really hard nut to crack. Let's go do it.
Right. And that was a very quick way of skipping over some of the biggest titles on your resume, which include Deputy Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Energy for 2 years.
I was with Secretary Moniz. Yeah.
Yes. That sounds pretty heavy.
I had some really good, smart, intense bosses that I learned a lot from.
And that, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it because we're talking about batteries and EV
and
infrastructure. But there's you were joking about nuclear. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd love to ask that. Like,
sure.
It is my understanding that modern French atomic plants, the waste is like 99.9% recyclable. It's not like 3 Mile Island. It's not like,
the
Japanese stuff. Well, there's no emissions. And there's very, right? Am I wrong? There's very,
the rest we can fire into the
little,
sun and it's all good.
No, but there's very, very, very little waste compared to the 1950s and 60s designs. Like, why isn't it? I mean, I know nukes are a non-starter, I guess, politically, but like, is anyone pushing?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different parts of this conversation. I did not expect to be talking nuclear here, so I haven't looked into Areva. I didn't look into Areva's recycling methodology in a long time.
Start talking.
But what I would say is, look, I agree with you on the climate side, right? Yeah, how can we have as many zero emissions things out there? We've got about 100 nuclear power plants in the U.S. that produce about 20% of the electricity in the U.S.
Right.
That's a really important baseload clean part. We should do more of that.
Right.
Part of the problem with nuclear is economic. The scale and size of one plant is a bet the company investment for any individual utility. You look what's going on in Georgia with that consortium that Southern did with MEAG and Oglethorpe, way over budget. You saw SCANA, like all these things have been so big that it's a bet the company investment. One of the things that
but I mean, wouldn't the DOE be able? That's one of the reasons you get government involved is you're not betting the company because it's backed by forgivable government.
Well, but except for the fact that you're usually talking about regulated investor-owned utilities where you're rate basing those costs. And so it's one of those things where if you're going to put, that level of billions of dollars into one generation facility, you could be screwing the ratepayers. You might not get approval from your regulator. And if it goes wrong, it goes real wrong, no matter who's standing behind it. Partially the reason I'm sharing that is I think one of the big things that we tried to do when I was at DOE and is hopefully bearing fruit now is invest in small modular reactors.
Okay.
Instead of doing these massive ones, can you do smaller ones that are replicable and maybe don't have to be a bet the company investment, but can get out there? And,
do you know offhand if anything's happening with that?
I mean, I haven't been paying as much attention, but like the guys at Third Way have done a really good job pushing nuclear as a clean energy climate solution, and there's a couple of companies, I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head now, that are doing small modular reactors, and DOE continues to support deployment of them. I just don't know, where the off-taker is at.
I also remember reading an article recently, I think it was New York Times, where they were saying that the cost of solar and wind has dropped so drastically that nuclear doesn't really even make sense financially
dropped
anymore.
Like all those birds, those big windmills are hitting.
Yes, well, the birds will die from windmills. But yeah, so it was just saying it's kind of like atomic
the
energy.
Economics right now at this point, you have no variable fuel cost with solar and wind. Right. So how do you beat that? Whether you're talking about uranium or you're talking about coal or you're talking about natural gas, right? The Henry Hub price is never going to go below zero.
Right.
Well, shouldn't say never, but
yeah.
But so as a result, like if you're looking at what's happening in the clean energy deployment world, solar plus storage is beating almost everything. Right?
And growing like crazy,
which is fantastic.
And it projected to grow. I was looking at projections through 2025, and it's going to go it's like 21% right now, or 21, and it's projected to go to like 30 soon. And coal's going to decline hopefully.
So, if we can bring this a little bit back to Earth.
On topic?
This is a topic.
No,
right?
no. I know.
I think it's a huge topic because we're talking about cars that are powered by electricity.
Yeah, but we also brought up some real. I'm sure half of our audience is like, oh, okay, I got a guy from the Obama administration and worked for Rahm Emanuel. Like,
I'm not sure of that at all.
You think we're
our audience
mostly liberal?
Well, I don't know about liberal, but I mean, I don't think our audience is.
Whatever. A lot of this is very. I don't know. It doesn't feel tangible or to maybe someone who's listening to us right now. So, in your time with the DOE, with in your time in government, what is something that either you witnessed go through, or you worked on, that is now very tangibly having results that people can see? Is there something you can point to and go like, everybody thought this was a terrible idea, or nobody cared, and now look at it? Because I think I know of at least one of them.
There's a lot of them, right?
Okay.
Let's go to this point you just made on solar costs, right? The Sunshot Initiative that Secretary Chu started and then carried through the administration was all about getting costs below $1 per watt. And it was, yes, there was some direct wafer technology and other things, but a lot of it was how do you reduce the soft costs, right? What standardized permitting look like, standardized contracting, and how do those things factor in? And there's actually a tremendous parallel between that and what's happening in my industry now today in EV charging, right? And we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, so sorry that it'll be a repeat for you.
That's fine.
But essentially, when EVgo is constructing a charging station, it's like 4 to 8 weeks of on-site actual construction. But soup to nuts to make a charging station become a reality, it's 12 to 18 months because you've got negotiations with a site host. You have early utility design approvals and the delays that go with the iteration there. You have permitting that can be across multiple different authorities. Construction then still requires then on the back end, meter set, utility interconnection, final building inspection, all of those things. That adds cost and time where you can have a situation where you've installed something that doesn't go live for 3 to 5 months afterwards, or worse in certain scenarios.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, what's your payback on that? What does it look like for the economics? All of these things. So if we can reduce those soft costs, in addition to getting continued improvement on the technology side, that helps the business case, because that's what this is about, is creating a business that's sustainable both financially and environmentally. So government had a big role to play in that in solar. We did our own, created a program we call Connect the Watts at EVgo to bring stakeholders together on this. And we think, obviously the government's also now working on a charging consortium on consumer experience. Like there are roles to play in that convening authority in addition to the technology. But I would also, same thing in EVs, the battery costs and the lithium ion reductions, a lot of it's from scale. A lot of it is from R&D that DOE and others did. Yep. And even hydrogen, which I'm not a big hydrogen acolyte, but if you look at the cost of fuel cells, where we were in 2009, and we continued investing in the R&D during the government invests in that. When people said, "Why? Just rip the Band-Aid. It's not going to happen," and it's bringing down the costs in a way where there's at least a discussion to be had about long haul.
I'm still not convinced. You did a great job of explaining where EVgo is helping speed the process, but everything you explained about how long it takes to set up an EV charging station sounds like hellish government bureaucracy. Where is the right? Like it's all state, local, federal,
but provincial.
Utilities are also not governmental, and that's the private sector part where there's an innovation that can happen. And on the local government side, a lot of it's education, right? If you're coming to a permitting authority who's never seen an EV charger, how do you deal with education on that? And California and New Jersey have done some really interesting things of permitting acceleration bills and saying, hey, local authority, if you get an EV charging permit, don't waste time on if it looks pretty and if the bushes are nice. Here's what you need to look for, and it's just going to go. So that's on the local side. On the federal side, what I meant by the direct wafer work and the R&D work, that was the federal government saying, hey, here's a technology breakthrough we're going to fund that will have this knock-on effect that now makes solar more competitive than anything else. And by the way, now we're going to look on the other barriers that we can help reduce. Like, look, I'm happy to give an argument for how government improves lives, but I didn't quite think that was where we were going.
Well, I am one. I guess the one I was thinking of is we can now look back at a lot of the decisions made, not just under the Obama administration, but like things like the Clean Air Act and stuff, where it's
massive.
We're now actually seeing the results. I think I just heard the other day, this is blew my mind because, you know, we're all roughly the same age. I grew up and the big thing was ozone. Like you got to take all these things out of your aerosol cans and we're all going to die because there's a huge hole in the ozone layer.
Thank God we figured it out back then, not in today's climate, because we'd all, you know, be dead.
And I just saw some article on the National Geographic that said, hey, the ozone's back. Like the hole's all closed up. It's way faster than we thought it happened. You know, so stuff like that. And more tangibly and recently, like the PPP, the Pavement Protection Plan, like here's a legislation that put all this money right away. Is there anything that the average...
this is exactly the point, right? We started this conversation talking about Tesla. Would Tesla be where it is today without a DOE loan?
No,
right?
Absolutely
Would
not.
the market for the EVs that we love be where it is right now without ATVM support, without infrastructure support? We funded a lot of grants.
Without Tesla.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Without Tesla.
Yeah, well, no, exactly. The team at Tesla deserves a lot of credit for advancing the ball. Look, here's a really fascinating thing. When I was at DOE, I would get calls from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle begging for us to move quicker to put money in their district. And then we would get yelled at by the Republicans later for spending money.
Of course.
And then we would also say, hey, we're going to come and bring a big check. And they would say, but please don't tell my constituents it's from a Democrat. Right? There's a fundamental problem here where you have a lot of people that are anti-government in places like Tennessee where the TVA made the economic development happen.
Tennessee Valley Authority.
Won the war. Yes. I mean, you know, like one of the greatest government projects of all time. You know, literally ended World War II.
All right. You know. All right. We went off. I was just trying to make this as relatable as possible.
Yeah.
I think we did.
Well, I mean, look, there's the list of things, right? GPS, radar, like there's all the things,
endless,
whether it's
endless.
DARPA or anywhere else.
The internet. I mean, you know, it just doesn't end. So I was gonna let's
I hope you guys have a great editor just for compression, right?
No, we don't.
No, we just want to we run this out. And they all love it.
Yeah. Let's get back to building charging stations.
Sure.
So I have a bunch of questions, and they're not EVgo specific. But like, you know, just off the top of my head, things that are often bandied about. Why are there no trash cans or toilets anywhere near a charger? Because you know it takes longer than 5 minutes, and you're eating, and you know we're humans. And then the other one would be like, you know, we sell more pickup trucks in this country than any other country on earth. Americans love towing stuff all over the place. Why are they all pull-in chargers? Why aren't they like gas stations where they're pull-through? So if I have a trailer, I don't have to like disconnect to charge. Go ahead.
Yep. So look, why don't we take those on plus where we started before a detour, right? Which is how do we do a better job as an industry with reliability? Right? Because the first thing...
I'm not even talking about reliability.
No, I know, but it's all related. It's all customer experience, right? The customers need to be happy. We have moved from the folks that were just really excited that there was anything to a mainstream market, right? We're no longer on the leading and bleeding edge. We're still early adopting, but we're pretty close to mainstream.
I would even say that we've hit this in California, LA, we've hit this tipping point. So like I was telling you before we started, I live within about 1.5 miles of two Electrify America charging banks. And I think there's like 3 or 4 at one and there's 3 at the other. And it used to be I could, night or day, whenever, I could get one. Now, would it work? Probably not, but I could like plug in.
It was there.
Now I can't even plug in. They're packed round the clock. There's absolutely no way to like just pop by and get a spot. You have to sit there and wait and wait and wait. Then you get in a fight with somebody else who's doing the same thing, trying to pull in. And
we should get into all of that, right?
Like
what we've done with
EVgo
EVgo reservations, the fact that we've got more than 3,000 fast charging stalls in our active engineering construction pipeline. Like there's all this work that we're doing on that. But I think it has to start with a customer-centric approach, right? We traditionally have owned and operated our chargers. Now we also have a white label offering and some other things. But when you own and operate, you're aligned with the customer. If it's not working, not only is the customer very unhappy, we're missing a revenue opportunity.
Sure.
So how do we make sure that we can do that better? It's early days still of the technology. I mean, EVgo's been around for more than a decade, which is eons in this industry.
Well, I would say, when do you stop saying it's early days? I think 10 years, and like I said, we've hit a tipping point in the nation's largest car market. Like, can't really say early days.
My point is that the tech has been evolving rapidly and is still pretty early, right? If you look at who's been manufacturing, right? We work with a diversity of suppliers intentionally so that we can be a technology specifier and so that we've got some diversity in supply chain.
Which is smart, yeah.
But if you look, Siemens was in, was out, back in, right? GE was in, was out, and was out, right? Like you've had a lot of changes, and so ABB has been there a long time, a lot of development ongoing. the cars have evolved, right? The 800-volt architecture we were talking about earlier has changed the game for some of them, but not for all of them. So, 4 years ago, when you had when we put the first 350 kilowatt charger out there, it was a science experiment because nobody could draw, right? When we put the first 150, it was the same thing. So when we're talking about now is, okay, how do we make sure that it's reliable for everyone? Because whether it's an EVgo charger or somebody else's, a bad charging experience is bad for mainstream adoption. Right. We need to get it to be better. So
I'd say it's a huge issue. I mean, obviously for the industry, because like I'm an EV owner, and I spend a lot of time, and again, it's mostly Electrify America, but chronicling like I think it's the worst company in the world, and I'd say that if the CEO is sitting across from me, I cannot believe how many times this thing has failed me. Like constant, last night.
Worst company, which I think
it has to be that it's still in business. I mean, like last night, my wife, she was going up to Big Bear with the kid. She, went specifically to a spot that had 350 kilowatt charger EA stations.
Barstow Walmart.
No, it was near Big Bear. I don't know, Colton or something. Anyway,
okay.
And she said plugged in and was charging at like 36 kilowatts in a car that can do 220. And then she said she did move to EVgo, but then got to 70%, and like she couldn't take it anymore and left, on a 350. So I mean, I can't remember. I shouldn't say it. Maybe it was a 150 EVgo. I'm not sure, but anyway. So it's like, a podcast where I talk about how great EVs are, and it fails for me like 80% of the time. So I mean,
look, I'm not going to badmouth any of our competitors because it's an industry problem, right? We all have to do better, and we have to recognize that we have to do better. So one of the things that we did is we launched a new initiative we call EVgo Renew. It's a 6-point plan that's very specific, or 6-plank platform, I should say. Not a political plan. That is, what are the different things that we have to do, right? And it starts with prevention. We have our lab in El Segundo to do a lot of testing, because one of the things that's challenging is that the things that can go wrong, many of which are not in our control. So we need to test the hell out of them before they roll out.
Like what?
So timing ends up being a major factor, right? So the car and the charger have to have a handshake to initiate the session. The car controls the maximum rate of charge. It asks for a certain amount of power. The charger says, okay, I can give that to you. But they also have to communicate to the payment methods, right? What's happening here, right? And the CCS protocol has a time designation for when it times out. And if one of the car makers decides they want to change how long that is, even by a fraction of a second, it can impact especially older equipment. Or if we have a firmware update that is changing something that's slightly delayed, it can time out. Or the credit card readers, right? The credit card readers not only have to rely on is the telecommunications network working appropriately, and not only relying on a specific manufacturer and vendor, they also have to then go through the payment processing vendors, which can reject transactions just for suspicion of fraud without communicating back to the customer.
But I would also say, like, I use my credit card, I don't know, 1,000 times a year or more, and it's only at EV chargers where it.
Can I tell you why? Because I only recently learned about this.
Please tell me why. I demand you tell me why.
There's categories of different types of transactions. And so they have different levels of sensitivity for potential fraud for different types of transactions. And the denominator of transactions in an emerging market like this is too small. So they, by proportion, bounce more of them.
But I mean, shouldn't that be like your job or some of your company's job to be like, stop that?
They don't care until we're at a certain scale. So that's
you know about lobbying, right?
Partially what our job is to provide multiple methods of payment, so there's some redundancy for customers, right? So whether it's the EVgo app, RFID, Auto Charge Plus, like all these different methods are really important.
I want to challenge you on that a little bit. I mean, maybe you're saying it's the market that has to get to a certain size.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking like if I get my hair cut, it's never been rejected. If I have
transaction code on that is haircuts.
Haircut, of which there's millions.
Okay, so you're saying it's the market, but
so look, and I'm not saying this means that we don't have any role to play here. We need to be working with these partners, and so again, there's the concept of what is it. Your question was about consumer experience, right? It is why is it where it is?
More of a complaint,
why isn't it better?
Not a question.
Right. Yeah. But at its core, it's what do we have to do to make it better? And so for us, it starts with reliability, and there's things that we need to figure out. What can we control? What can't we control? 3 years ago, if a charger wasn't working, you would get one error, connection error. So what did that mean?
Very familiar.
Right? It didn't mean it could mean that it wasn't plugged in all the way. It could mean the car was broken. It could mean the charger was broken. It could mean that AT&T went down. There was no feedback loop to us or you. So we've been working with the suppliers to now have minimum recommended error codes so that we can know what the hell is going on and then do analytics and diagnostics and correct our preventative maintenance schedules. Do all of those things are part of what we all have to do as an industry, in addition to bringing the various stakeholders together and saying, hey, credit card readers have to get better. We need to figure out how to do this together. Hey, we need to figure out how can we get more seamless integration with different automakers, again, whether it's with AutoCharge Plus. The move to 15.11.8 requires some additional work on root certificate authority.
Like, hang on. 15.11.8
we're going to get nerdy here.
Yeah, but you got to explain both those terms.
So ISO 15.11.8 is an international standard for basically, it's been oversimplified as plug-in charge, right? And so there's different ways to get to that functionality. We've been working on ISO 15.11.8, but we've also just rolled out AutoCharge Plus because we didn't want customers to have to wait. Because right now,
and so what does that do?
So if you think about it, if the car let me explain EVgo's approach with AutoCharge Plus, and then talk about 15.11.8 in both theory and practice, right? So what we do is we leverage a unique identifier for the vehicle so that you can register your car to your EVgo account. So when I go up to an EVgo charger, I have already enrolled in AutoCharge so that the charger will recognize my Ioniq 5 and bill my account. Right?
Yeah, which seems to be that should have been happened from day one.
This is all Tesla owners listening to this in their car.
Yeah, they're
eye-rolling the hell out of us right now.
Because look, and if it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is easier to do one model.
Yes, on your own network.
Correct. We have to serve everything. And some cars don't have unique identifiers. Like there's all these different types of.
They do. I mean, they do have unique identifiers.
Well, you can't do the VIN for a lot of things.
Well, anyway, well, you know what I'm saying. There's a. In other words, how do I put this? Nissan. They could look at the software of one leaf from another leaf and tell them apart. There's always a unique identifier.
Sure.
Anything with a database in it.
Yes, that's fair. But the concept of the unique identifier that we're leveraging, not all automakers have them unique. That's the issue that we can get into. On the 15.11.8 side, the way that works is similar, except there's an outside root certificate authority that validates, right? So it's a little bit more complicated. And by virtue of that complication,
it's like a ledger. It looks at the car up against the ledger.
Yeah, think about it as like
blockchain,
whatever.
Exactly.
Think of it as a little bit more blockchainy. But the problem is that right now there's one entity that's really that root certificate authority, and they haven't yet solved a couple of challenges. One is, what about an automaker that doesn't want to work with them? And there's some other things happening in the SAE world. And then also, what happens if somebody has multiple certificates? So think about it this way. You have accounts with Electrify America, with EVgo, with ChargePoint, others, right? So if your car pulls up, and you pull up your car into one of those, will 15.11.8 and will the car and the charger know to look for the home certificate, or will it just go to the first certificate? So in other words, if you have a membership with EVgo,
let's pause and back up, because I think again
I'm way in the weeds. Sorry,
I don't think so at all.
No, you're just, for the people who are listening. What he's saying is, practically speaking, whether it's AutoCharge or 15.11.8, it's you as the owner of the EV pull up to a charger, undo the charge handle, pop it in the car, and walk away. There's nothing you do right now with scanning, pulling out your card, double-clicking on your iPhone to bring up the Apple Wallet to acknowledge. The car,
the car is your account valid.
Exactly. And his question, and the explainer is, it goes both ways. If I have an EVgo account, I have a ChargePoint account, I have an Electrify account, which account is going to choose from? That's your question. Or we work at a company where we trade cars all the time. Or if you're in a fleet, like, how is it going to know who, if this car shows up, who to charge, right? If it's a shared vehicle.
But I also think what you're really saying is that this is the real downside of zero standardization within an industry.
Well, so ISO 15.11 is trying to get us to the standard. The problem is that, again, super nerdy, there was a -1 and a -2.
Of course.
And then a -2.0. And some folks went out and implemented one that wasn't backwards compatible.
See, this is where I think why you need large federal governments. Because if I was running things, I'd be like, okay, here's the way it's going to be, and you can't sell cars to Americans unless your cars do this, and you can't make money charging cars unless you all work off this standard, and then it just whips everyone into doing it.
All EVs will have 8,000 horsepower and 6 motors.
Well, that's true. Yes, if I was really in charge, yes. Well, they will have that anyways. Don't worry. But you know what I'm saying? Like, so just like that's.
I think the standards conversation has been a challenge over the course of this industry, in part because of, CCS versus CHAdeMO versus Tesla was the dominant fight. My personal thing is I'd rather they standardize the location of the port.
Right. Well, Yeah,
but at the same time, there's all these other things. Is it through Charin? Is it through SAE? Like all these different trade associations, because it's rapidly changing.
Is that what it is? It just keeps changing. Because I was going to say, this seems to be a more difficult standardization. No one thinks about it, but you open up your car to put gas in it. The hole is a certain diameter. You know what I mean? Like it uses gasoline instead of benzene. This is all standardized at some point.
It took a while to get there, though.
Yep.
I mean, did it? I don't know the fight. I don't know the fight for
we weren't alive then.
The bore size of the pump, but it really got standardized and it really worked well for a century. And why?
And it will.
You think it will?
Think about it this way.
It will.
He's a positive person. He used to work in the government.
Standardization and standards bodies are very deliberative. They take years to do things.
I didn't know that.
And then, so ISO, International Standards Organization, or NIST. NIST does a lot of the standards too for weights and measures that states use. So those processes are not quick.
Yep.
And so if you're in a 2 to 4 year rulemaking process or regulation process or some other process or even a 1 to 2 year process, the technology can have leapfrogged you.
Yeah.
Right? One of the things that we've been trying to communicate to the federal government about the $5 billion in formula funds from the infrastructure bill is, if you're doing a minimum standard, make sure it's actually a minimum, because what happens if the world changes, right? So they wanted to require a version of 15.11.8 and a version of OCPP and these other standards, right?
What's OCPP?
So there's OCPP and OCPI are two different communications protocols.
Okay.
One talks to car to charger, and the other is kind of charger to charger, network to network. And so it was this conversation of, why would you require a specific one that isn't the one most people are using today when we might all change that in a certain amount? So the concept there is just, it's going to move quickly. What are the actual minimums? And those standards haven't been finalized yet because they were proposed and we're waiting for that finalization to come out.
When you talk about standardization, and we're 15 years now, call it, that's generous, on EVs at being rolled out to the general public using the J1172 charge handle. Is that specific hardware, was that a terrible idea? Did we, I had a great conversation with the CEO of Ford, and he is just like, this charge handle sucks. It breaks. He was very complimentary about Tesla's handle. No moving parts. You plug it in. It connects. It charges.
Megawatt.
It doesn't drop. It doesn't break when you drop it. And I was sort of mystified because I was like, dude, you're the CEO of Ford. If anybody could fix this at least at a large brand, it would be you. But J1172 is the industry standard for basically everything now, because CHAdeMO is going away, right?
I think because of the CCS J1772, the way to have that over, people didn't like the concept of, if you had a CHAdeMO, you also still needed the J1772, right? Because you had the fast DCFC versus L2. I don't know if it was a mistake or not. I think the bigger issue was it took us too long for everybody to say we're on with one, and so you had, this is still a discussion, right? If you're a Leaf driver, I'm driving a Leaf today.
Yeah.
If you're a Leaf driver, you're pretty frustrated that new chargers aren't coming out with CHAdeMO, right?
Yeah.
And that actually has an equity impact. Most Americans don't buy new cars. They buy used cars. So there's a huge base out there of Leafs that will continue to trade hands and be in lower to moderate income households. Are they going to have access to chargers?
Right. The answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no. Yeah.
So, they will for a while, but how long? And will they? That's a challenge.
So let me just pause here because
Sorry,
again,
can I do one more thing?
Yeah.
On your they break and the handle thing. That's a huge issue on the CCS side, right? And so one of the things we've been doing is replacing the plastic part with metal. On the top, right? Because the latch breaks all the time and makes it a lot easier to fall off, and then you have some potential safety issues. And so,
but metal's not for people listening. Metal's not a safety.
There's metal in the connector already, right?
Yeah, but I mean your thumb's on it.
Only if you lick it.
If you're licking things at the charger, we need
I'm
to have
not
a series
licking.
of
No, but
hygiene
I'm just saying.
and other personal behavior.
I mean, look, I know that EVs, we were talking about this. Was it yesterday? The industry's done a very good job of making them pretty safe. No one's really getting electrocuted, but you start hearing we're replacing the plastic part with a metal part that you'd put your hand on like that.
But that's why so one of the things that's Underwriters Laboratories, UL, is fantastic for being a testing organization, right? But it's still early enough that there aren't test standards for everything. So one of the things that they look for single points of failure on equipment, and we look for every point of failure. And so we created our own submersion test. We created our own drop test. At the EVgo Innovation Lab in El Segundo, we're basically testing all of those things because we won't put something into the field if we don't think it's safe.
Sure.
Okay.
Plus, we still get the question from customers, can I take my EV in a car wash?
Right.
Right. And so it's one of those things we have.
Can I charge when it's raining?
They're waterproof.
You can
drive underwater.
We need a lot of EV education. Right. Even EV drivers don't speak kilowatt versus kilowatt hour.
Right.
So how do we get to that place where customers have confidence? It's going to work. I know what I'm doing. We get blamed when a Mach-E is drawing less than 150 kilowatts at 70% state of charge.
Yeah.
And
it's not your fault.
Not our fault.
Right.
But we can't whine about it. We say, look, here, let's educate you.
Right.
What impacts the rate of charge? What the car can do, what the charger can do, state of charge, the weather,
the battery condition.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, I did want to ask this because you again come from public service, you come from government. You're used to writing policy, making bold predictions, or trying to move legislation through that affect a lot of people. All right, everything about what we just talked about, I think, flew over probably like 50% of our audience's heads.
Mm-hmm. You really dislike our audience.
No. I'm just saying,
was that the Obama haters?
No. I'm looking at you guys going, what are you guys talking about? And most of it is, I think, here's the point.
Mm-hmm.
This all seems really too hard. You said it earlier.
Yeah. Set it and forget it.
The earliest adopters have already adopted the guy. They're mostly driving Teslas. We're still in slightly the early adopter phase. There's now Super Bowl commercials about EVs. Yep. I just saw the one with Will Ferrell and Netflix and General Motors. They're announcing this thing like they're trying to get more butts in seats. Mm-hmm. All this stuff we talked about seems like a huge problem for everybody. Like someone's going to go have an experience like Johnny's had, charging on a popular.
It's not just Johnny.
Oh, I know. No, I did the same thing. I went from two small cities in California, Los Angeles, to Sacramento,
state capital,
and had a problem charging along one of the most trafficked routes in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Like
country.
Yeah, when this happens at scale, we're going to face a huge problem in terms of EV adoption. Are we not? I mean, you seem like a really positive person, and you're part of the solution with the charging network. Are we screwed or what? Like, are we going to see? Is it inevitable? That's what the bell's for.
Oh, got it. Well, I guess I haven't said it yet. Yeah. Look, I think that we can solve this, and it's going to require a lot of cooperation, coordination, and build out. That's partially why it's an exciting moment in time with the federal funding coming out. The $5 billion will help induce, but we need to make sure that it's not just going to folks that don't have experience that are going to build things and walk away from them. And we all have to get better at this, which is going to require some more, like I said, the DOE announced that they've got this charging consortium on focusing on customer experience, trying to bring all of the industry stakeholders together on their own to say, hey, make sure that happens. Like, you're 100% right. My mother-in-law asked me about the F-150 Lightning. My mother-in-law drives a Subaru, has never expressed an interest in a pickup truck in her entire life. But suddenly, because it's really cool,
because it's MotorTrend's Truck of the Year.
That's true. Yeah. Very true. Yeah.
Well, and one of my colleagues, his mom, just took delivery of her F-150 Lightning, and it's like she's not a pickup truck woman, but she's all in on it, right?
I mean, my wife drives the Rivian. She's never thought about a pickup truck before, unless it was like a '53 Chevy. She liked the look of those, but she loves it.
Right. Yeah. And so all of those customers that weren't truck people and weren't EV people are now EV truck people. It has to work for them, right? And so will it? Is, I think, one of those questions of right now in most markets, California is a bit of an exception, but in most markets, you have a little bit of you're going to use whatever's near you, or these types of scenarios, right? When you have far more chargers out there, then all of a sudden it's what is the customer experience? If you're reliable, if you can deliver additional value through whether it's software features or anything else, if you're a trusted and reliable brand, people will choose you. I mean, the EVgo thesis here is we're building a network that is going to have great locations, that is reliable, that has the ability to be delivering software services. We've got reservations, a rewards program, coupons, things like that.
Toilets?
We'll come back to your question on that.
Trash cans?
Because
we've seen both.
That's what we need. We want people to say, I'm choosing to use EVgo because I know I can trust that it works. I know that it's in a great location with a partner like a Whole Foods or somewhere else, and with great amenities that I can go use and all those things that go with it.
Well, hang on, because this one, you brought up your mother?
My mother-in-law.
Your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And you brought up your wife.
Yeah.
I had a great conversation with the CMO of Hyundai America, Angela Zepeda.
Yeah.
We were talking about this whole thing, EV adoption and the move from gas to electrified vehicles. And she's a she, and she was talking about, the thing we know I'm paraphrasing, not a lot of people talk about is the safety angle. It's just like, I'm a woman, when I go on a road trip by myself in my gasoline powered car and I see a gas station up ahead, I'm going to the one that's well lit. I can see somebody inside.
Oh, Kristen Lee said that. I mean, that was,
yeah.
And we've been hearing that feedback too.
When I'm going up the 5 freeway to Sacramento, and I'm hunting around for a working charger while it's raining at the back of a Shell station, out of eyesight of like most of the people from the highway and at the gas station itself, and there's trash everywhere. Like this is the layer on top of it. None of the EV manufacturers, none of the premium luxury brands should even think about doing their own EV unless they can solve for this. Because this is the most non-premium experience ever to like have to deal with this thing. Most of these things aren't even under awnings, Yeah. Meanwhile, and again, I'm not the biggest Tesla lover, but a lot of these places that you drive past 80 superchargers under an awning with lights on, and there's lots of people. Even if they're
not, I will also say, I mean, one of my things I point to all the time is in Pismo, where there's a EA station that has 350. There's like 3 or 4 EA chargers, and there's like I don't know, 25. No, it's just in a parking lot. There's 25 Tesla chargers. There's always a Tesla around, but it's really in the corner. I mean, Pismo's pretty safe, but like. It's just
sketchy.
I want to talk about okay, your mother-in-law truck, great, but like
I got to get her over the hump to go full electric first, but she's excited about the prospect.
Right, but I'm saying trucks. So like none of these charging stations, locations that I've seen are built with trucks in mind. Like the width of the parking spot at the EA near my house. If I put a Lightning there, I couldn't open the doors if there was a Hyundai parked next to me. They're tiny little spots, and again, they're all pull in. They're not pull through.
Look, this is a challenge that we have to resolve. And we've been having some discussions
on that.
Yeah, we are. Look, our automaker partners care deeply about it, right? It's not just Ford rolling out trucks, right? So everybody wants to know, how do you solve this issue? And some of it is, can you find ways to work with some bigger footprint? A lot of this is a real estate game, right? When we work with partners, we're working within confines of, if we're working with a particular grocery store or a REIT, how many of those spaces do they even control? One of the things that, go back to your point on policy, that mattered in California in a good way was if you build EV charging spaces, do those count towards the parking minimums that are required? Right? Because sometimes people will see it as, a business will say, I'm losing a spot if we turn it into an EV charging spot, and then I can't do this, right? Or if we need to burn a spot to put support equipment, because we've got the dispensers and the cabinets are split, so are we eating spots from them that hurt either their minimum or that they see as a reduction in revenue from retail throughput? So you end up having
I would just say, as an EVgo customer, I don't care. I really don't care about that issue.
But my point is, when we're navigating, how many chargers can we put on a location?
Right.
Where can we put them? We don't always have control over that, right? And what we do have control is, okay, if we know we're going to X amount of spaces, we know that there's going to be an ADA requirement, so then we can start looking at striping, making sure it's bigger on those side, the van
Americans
spaces.
with Disabilities Act.
But you can't get into the real estate game?
No, we have some, right? There are some where we have taken over some large footprint sites that we're building ourselves. But frankly, it's hard to make the business case work everywhere for large footprint stations. Your point on X amount of non-Tesla and 25 Tesla's still 60+% of BEV sales in the U.S.
Yep.
Yeah, but changing. I mean, that's
absolutely changing. I'm not saying that's where I'm saying it's.
I'm saying,
but
you want to be here in 5 years as a business,
right?
Yeah.
But my point of that is, so your real estate discussion and framework is very different, and so it's a balancing act that we all have to work through.
Well, so you talked about it briefly, and it was news to me because I hadn't really fully understood the sort of foundational levels of EVgo. But you guys own and operate all of your charging.
Not all,
but the vast majority,
right?
Which is different from ChargePoint,
yep,
right? Which causes problems for them because nobody seems to care if a ChargePoint charger's broken or not. There's no incentive to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And then EA is obviously the government mandated company set up after Dieselgate. So
industry.
They got their own thing going on. So so EVgo's model is, I mean, where just break it down. Where are you making your money?
Right. So look,
that's a great point.
Yeah, this is actually a key question, right? There are different business models that are going to have different impacts here. Ultimately, we think that having this DNA as an owner-operator is what gets us the most motivated to make sure everything is working, because we tend to make our money on usage, right? Okay. The customer is using. Now, we do have automaker partners, right, where we've got partnerships with Nissan and Subaru and GM and Toyota, where there is either free or discounted other types of charging, right? With you, if you buy or lease a Nissan Ariya, you're going to get 1 year of unlimited charging with EVgo.
Toyota, I just read this in your press release on your site. Solterra gets $400 worth of charging. Is that right? No, so BZ, that's Subaru.
The BZ4X has unlimited, for 1 year. The Subaru Solterra is
400.
I think that's right. I should know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
And what we've been doing with the Leaf had been 250. They wanted to go up on the Ariya to unlimited and scale back on the Leaf a little bit as the production volumes change.
Can you believe they really called it the BZ4X?
Yes, it's awesome. What a great
name.
It
rolls
right off the tongue.
It's like a rejected droid name from Empire.
So we're clear.
So the point being that so the reason I share those incentive programs is because we are also making money from our automaker partners, right? But the usage of our network is our primary motivation.
There's no...
And then on top of that, we're layering on other services. So reservations, for example, you can pay... Okay. We've done a limited reservation pilot that we are going to learn from and expand.
How does that work? You physically lock someone out of a charger if they...
Yeah, so great question, actually, because this is why we started with a pilot. How do we learn what to do here, right? And so one of the things we had to do, because we don't always control the firmware from the manufacturer on the charging side and what we can display on the HMI. So we basically put up these big bollards that said, this is a reservation available charger, right? So they changed the color of them so you knew that it might not be available if you hadn't made a reservation. And then we created 2 different types of reservations, EVgo Reserve Now, EVgo Reserve in the Future, and said, okay, if you know that you're taking your kid to baseball practice and you're going to have to wait for her on Tuesday night at 7, you can just reserve that a week in advance if you wanted to. And then we could do Reserve Now. I want to make sure that charger's still there in 20 minutes. And what we found was nobody was taking Reserve in the Future. Everybody was saying, I'm willing to pay $3 on what's going to be a $10 charge to make sure that's still there in 20 minutes. Pretty interesting data point, frankly, on customer elasticity and where things are. But what it meant is we did have to software lock it out and say, okay, if Johnny is reserving that and Ed pulls up, he can't use that charger.
Boy, I would be furious.
Which is why what we've done in the pilot has not been making all of them reservable, but making 1 or 2 on a site reservable. But people are willing to pay for this, and we got asked for it.
Can you bid on it and block people out? That's the future.
There's a no-show fee.
Again, that's nice, but I'm just thinking of my experience with public charging. Because there's never enough chargers now. If there's 3 or 4 charging stations and I pulled up and others were in use and one was reserved, I'd hook a tow cable to that charger and I'd remove it. I would be so furious.
You'd rip the handle off.
Yeah, no. I'd rip the charger out of the ground. Yeah.
Americans are impatient.
First of all, we have suspect number 1 if something happens to one of our chargers.
I'm just saying. Imagine pulling up to a gas station and there's an empty pump and it's it's not that it's broken. It's like you just can't use it because someone's going to be here in a minute.
Somebody better than you. Somebody better, richer, and more forward-thinking.
I would be furious.
Look, part of our job in the B2C world is to listen to customers, and so I'm hearing your perspective. But what we had been hearing for a very long time was customers very much requesting, I'll say, instead of demanding, the ability to reserve.
Sure.
It was a common theme of, I know I'm going there, I want to go make sure that I don't have to go wait
but
if somebody else
you don't interpret that as we should just put in more chargers.
No, of course we're building more chargers, Johnny.
In that location.
But you can't always do it in that location. How much power do you have there? How many parking spaces can you do there? So it's one of those times, one of the things that we look at is...
You can. You figure it out. That's a solvable problem.
Figure it out is there's a very interesting point there when you're talking about what's the megawatt availability there that maybe at 2 blocks away it's better, or you have a partner that only has access.
Go 2 blocks away.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of times what we look at is, hey, we have a great site. Do we want to expand it? Do we want to go across the street? Do we want to go to a place entirely different? That's part of the discipline that we look at our sites with, and we're constantly monitoring our network for not just health checks and doing maintenance, but also where are the trends happening
popularity.
In utilization?
You know this already. You know how when there's a Waffle House on both sides of the freeway, you're like, how did that happen? Well, they put this one, and there's too many people, so they put one on the other side of the freeway.
No, it's because the traffic's going in 2 different directions.
Well, also genius?
Yeah, well.
All right, so the last question on the profitability piece. So there's no funny money like government. You guys aren't like making a ton of money
subsidies
off
are also important. Okay. Yeah, absolutely subsidies.
How do you rank them? Is it consumer, OEM, subsidies?
So look, the way that I think about it is, where is our revenue coming from? It's coming from consumers. I think about subsidies as lowering our costs, which obviously improves our break even, right? That's part of the same equation. But if you look at where we are in this market, right? What EV charging as a business looks like at 6% BEV sales is very different than what EV charging looks like when you're at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% BEV sales.
What does it look like then?
Well, it should look like much higher utilization is the point. Because
more people, more money.
Here we have a very California mindset. But when you're not in California, when you're visiting my folks in Chicago, or you're visiting even my friends in DC, right? There are a lot more cars now than there were a couple years ago, but there are not nearly as many BEVs. And so that penetration impacts your queuing theory. It impacts what size. We are building much larger stations.
No. What I'm saying is, like, what you know, as the car industry has shown, what is on a Californian's mind now is on the rest of the country's mind in 10 years.
Right. Exactly. This is a phrase I use all the time.
Coastal elite.
Are we trying to build 2040s infrastructure today, or should we really be building 2025's infrastructure today and build 2040s infrastructure in like 2038? And
I don't know.
There's a little bit of this.
Maybe 2040s.
Well,
future-proof.
But 2040s is that how can you future-proof when we don't know what's going to change, and we don't want to have a bunch of assets that aren't being used, right? The metaphor that I like to use, and I was talking about this with somebody today. I hate the chicken and the egg, and some of my colleagues are sick of hearing me say this, but there's an assumption with the chicken and the egg that you're starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. We have a base of infrastructure. We have really good cars. What we need is peanut butter and jelly. How do you complement them? Have a base of infrastructure to support the cars, have enough cars to use the infrastructure to have a business case to build more, and continue to have complementary policies and economics to support both in a virtuous cycle to make it spin. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
And that's why sometimes, a customer will say, why don't you build a 10 charger station right here? And it's like, well, you're one of 7 people driving an EV in that market.
Right, but if I said, why don't you put it right here, and it makes sense because there's 700 EVs like parked waiting for, one ID4 on a 350
Then we're at the
move.
conversation you and I had before of where is it that we are trying to build and we are having challenges with the local utility or the local permitting authority, and where is it that we aren't because the economics are really challenging beyond the usage. There are markets where our effective cost per kilowatt hour is north of $1.
Right, which is crazy.
You can't pass on to customers.
So what do you do? I mean, I know you can't talk freely in specifics about this problem, but like, what do you do if you have a municipality that's just like they're not going to play ball? They won't get your permits going.
You mean like the entire state of Montana, which just passed that?
No, that was
fake
Idaho.
It's Montana.
I think it was Idaho. The fake where they're going to ban.
I thought it was
EVs.
Wyoming. And
it was Wyoming.
I thought the legislator introduced it and then said he actually didn't want to ban them.
It was a joke.
He
he said it was a statement against the people banning ICE vehicles.
Yeah. It's the sale of new ICE vehicles. But
trust me, you don't have to argue with me on
that. No, but
so
let's just say this lost city of Atlantis, they're really hard to work with. And they want to put in a lot of chargers in Atlantis, but Atlantis isn't letting charging companies do it just because of not even a political stance, just bureaucracy with non-caring and so in other words, they'd like to put a lot of chargers in Atlantis, but they can't.
You're looking at me like I know which city you're talking about.
We might live in it, but I'm just saying,
okay.
What I'm saying, but if you have a municipality that's not playing ball, what do you do?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think it's generally that there's municipalities trying to obstruct as much as it is either education or they don't have resources or their bureaucracy does get in the way. And so sometimes you look to go across the street, which can be challenging depending on the territories that you're in. Sometimes it's the utility, sometimes it's the city. Sometimes you have to go work with your competitors to try and influence it, right? Are you doing that? Sometimes we do that at rate cases at the PUC, at the Public Utility Commission. Sometimes we're doing it contact local elected officials. Sometimes it's relationship driven. It takes a lot of time and energy because it can be challenging to say, why are we waiting 4 months for an interconnect in this particular territory?
And you got to do it piecemeal every time.
Right. And so that's partially why we launched that Connect the Watts initiative to say, hey, can we give a shout out? And so we just did an inaugural EV Charging Heroes Award. And we said, hey, look at National Grid. Look at the best practices they're using out on the East Coast. Can we get those to metastasize and have other utilities learn from those best practices?
And you're saying National Grid is an example of a municipality that is playing ball, for lack of a better
term.
It's a utility that's doing a really good job. One of the things that's challenging sometimes is a lack of clarity on timeline expectations. Like if I know something's going to take 6 weeks, that's good to know. If I know it's going to take 12 weeks, that's good to know. If I don't know if it's going to take 2 to 36, that's very problematic.
Yeah.
Because what can you sequence? There are some things that you can do at the same time, and other things you have to do, wait for one step to go to the next one. It's a big challenge for us in a lot of specific markets, and so sometimes it's just kind of taking the hammer and doing the Andy Dufresne thing and chipping away at it a little bit at a time. Other times it's
good metaphor. Go ahead.
Other times it's sometimes you got to whisper to the press of
what's
hey,
the beautiful
we're having a problem here.
What's the beautiful poster you're hanging over the front of this thing?
Oh,
I would imagine it's an electric Hummer.
Oh, there you go. Okay, let's pivot here because we're running out of time, and I got a lot of stuff to ask you because you guys are so close to our headquarters, right? You guys are your R&D facilities in El Segundo.
Yep. The lab is in El Segundo. Our headquarters is on the west side of LA at Olympic and Bundy.
Okay, but you're based in.
I'm based in DC, but that's because I was living in Santa Monica, and then we went full remote, and my wife said, let's go back east.
Okay.
His wife isn't in the federal government.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Okay. God, I got a lot of questions. Let's go back. Let's start with the one that you can actually help me with because your title is Chief Commercial Officer. So you're so close to us. I just got approval from our CFO to install a fast charger at our office, which is right around the corner.
But we need like 5 fast chargers.
Well, the only requirement is we need them not inside the building. Right now we have like a level 2 inside behind a roll-up door. Yeah, like insane.
Yeah. Made sense 10 years ago when we installed it.
Yes, we would love
it's a lovely amenity as a workplace charging offer.
We would love to put one at our office.
5.
Probably a pull-through.
5.
How do we play Let's Make It? Do you guys do that? You do corporate?
So we do a couple of things. We do, hey, do you have a great location that we might want to use for our own chargers that we own? And then we have an offering we call EVgo Extend, which is our white label offering. We tend not to necessarily do one-offs on it, but we can have a conversation and see if there's a deal to be had.
Okay. Let's just do this right now.
Yeah.
Is there... And
my CFO is going to be like, how dare you do anything without coming back to the team?
Oh, I'll take a listen to this.
We'll have a conversation.
Because we're buying...
Yeah, we're going to buy somebody.
EVs.
So you want to cut us a deal or give us some advice on that? So we'd be happy to entertain offers. The thing to Johnny's point is, and I wonder, again, as a commercial officer, do you have any? This is sort of a marketing question, I guess. I think our team looked, and there aren't any truck EV charge, no pull-throughs
just Rivian. Oh yeah.
In Southern California.
Yeah. None.
Rivian the closest I think is 2 up in northern on the way.
Bishop, yeah. So all Rivian chargers are pull through. It's a truck company, and they want you to be towing something. The problem is they only put them in places where nobody lives. So they're like, it's great if you're going to Mammoth, but like if you're not, it's.
Do you think there's any value in us putting one in the beautiful city of El Segundo, right off the 405 freeway, and then maybe
your parking lot is tight over there?
Well, we've already talked to landlords. We know we can put it in. We're just trying to figure out where and how. I would suggest a pull through that you can go approach from either side, so it doesn't matter which side the charge port is, and then we'll put it onto the plug share charge locator with a giant flag that says, "Hey, this one's for trucks." Like, is there any marketing value to making?
We talked about this a little bit earlier, elliptically, but our automaker partners are pushing us on this, right? Okay. They want to know how many pull-throughs are an option, right? And where can they be an option? And so again, this is the real estate game conversation. So if you're telling me you're a site host looking to have a pull-through charging station that EVgo owns and operates, that's an interesting conversation for us. If you're telling me you want us to sell you one, slightly less interesting, but let's talk about it.
Right, because it would be owned and operated by you guys. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right, great. We can table that. I did. That was also a sideways way to talk about your acquisition of Recargo and PlugShare.
I thought that's where it was going.
Yeah, which is super annoying to me because as this EV thing started to heat up, we're like, boy, wouldn't it be great if the MotorTrend Group owned some kind of
bring a trailer. Oh wait,
no. Charge location like service or map.
Yeah.
And we looked around, and as I was Googling, this was literally, I think, like a month after the deal was announced. I was like, dang it. And these guys are literally right next door.
Yeah.
So what is the deal?
They're a great team.
What is the deal? You guys bought Recargo, which is PlugShare. is the largest, right? Are they the largest EV locator?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, at this point, if you buy an EV, you tend to download PlugShare.
Yep. Or a better route planner, which I like.
Well, and a better route planner is integrated into the PlugShare website too.
Is that you guys didn't acquire?
No, that's just
that's a deal.
It's a relationship that was before we acquired Recargo, and it's kind of great because even this morning I was helping a friend plan a route, and it was like, hey, go on the PlugShare website, type in some things, check the elevation to make sure you're really thinking about this, and then save your trip, and it'll load on Android Autoplay or Apple CarPlay in the PlugShare interface.
So PlugShare, for those who aren't familiar, you have everybody's on there, right? PlugShare, well, because you was an acquisition. So PlugShare doesn't just list EVgo chargers.
Yeah, no. PlugShare is ecumenical, right? It is one of those things where
it's a big word. That is a 10. I want to hit that button so hard, but no, that's a big. Okay, yes.
So
agnostic,
non-denominational.
Yes. Yeah. So what PlugShare does is it works with both the charging companies directly as well as customers to do own user-generated content, peer-to-peer stuff, just loading it up. So what you end up having is like EVgo was a customer of PlugShare before we acquired PlugShare. So we have an integration that shows our chargers and their availability real time. For the charging networks that PlugShare doesn't have dynamic information for, sometimes it just has static information, so it won't show the status of the chargers real time. Or if we don't have if PlugShare doesn't have a relationship with a particular charging network, customers upload it. If you think about the history of PlugShare, it was originally, can I share the charger that I have with somebody?
Right.
Early days,
I'm going to your house.
Right. Of like, hey, and this is partially how does this industry evolve? Right. We are well beyond those days, but that sense of community is really important. And what I like about PlugShare is customers give very real feedback. Right. So we use it. We used it even before we acquired PlugShare because every charging network has a dashboard, so you can hear directly from customers. Here's what I'm mad about. And you can reply to them in it, or you can just take that back and do some changes. But it's a really great resource to be able to say, okay, when I'm planning my trips, like the last time I drove from DC to Philly, I did okay, I think I know which charger I'm planning on using, but at this point, my bladder is more of a limiting factor than the range on my vehicle. So where might else I stop while I'm going to need to take a break anyway?
Because there's no toilets near chargers.
Zing. Okay.
No, my point was
So just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Currently, PlugShare will tell you of availability of EVgo's chargers
and a lot of others. Like if you open the PlugShare app right now, you'll see what's orange. Orange chargers are fast chargers and green chargers are L2s, and then basically you just look into it and it says available, in use, in maintenance. And that's
but here's the thing: I tried that on my road trip, and to what degree of accuracy is
for companies that PlugShare has a direct integration with, 100%. For the ones they don't, very low.
So EVgo's are great, and everybody else, all the other main guys.
EVgo's is great. Blinks are great. There's a lot of different ones where the real time information is there. We can go through this. I mean, I don't have the list in front of me.
But it is real. It is real time.
Yep.
Like you're talking.
You're saying if I'm using PlugShare and I see an Electrify America station, that's not accurate because they're not a direct blah blah.
They actually might be. I don't remember. That's why I'm saying I don't have the list in front of me. I've got a colleague who's focusing her time on PlugShare more than I am. So it's one of those things where
But buyer beware. It's not like
not 100%. Basically, if it's showing status, it's generally good. But
it could not be good.
Why don't I come back to you?
But this is still too complicated. I'm trying to argue for I'm trying to argue for the simple guy.
PlugShare is the best way to find locations, and generally speaking, it's the best way to find status, in my opinion. There's more work we need to do.
Better than the app that came with the car.
Oh yeah, I mean, it depends on your car. Well, but my car, I love the car. I don't love the.
Better than Google.
Than Audi.
I was using. I got this VW ID4 for work. I was pinging the VW app. I was pinging the app itself, because it was somehow more responsive than the thing in the car. I was trying to find the one in the car. Then I would jump to PlugShare and a better route planner and Google Maps, just because I can.
Yeah, that's too much.
Yeah,
totally
it's
way too much.
It's 5 apps too much, right?
Like I would say if you had a Volkswagen Group product, man, that's like the worst case scenario for finding a charger.
Well, okay, yeah, they got their own problems. We'll get there. We'll hopefully have.
Let me ask you this, Jonathan. So, when is the tipping point where it's as easy as going to a gas station? Meaning, I know it's going to work. I know there's going to be an empty pump, and if there is an empty pump, it's like a momentary
Tesla.
You know,
Whoops.
well, no. But even Teslas are full. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the tipping point? And I say, is it is it at 30% EV adoption, 50%? Like, because it's got to get to that, right?
Yeah.
It's inevitable that like, we're Americans, right? Like, my favorite Dead Kennedys album, give me convenience or give me death.
Mm-hmm.
And and it seems that most people that don't like EVs agree with that statement. So what and you must be doing forecasting about it. Like when.
Well, I like how Ed was the one saying that I make big bold predictions, and then you come to me looking for this very specific prediction.
I mean, you must think about the future.
I think right now, we have to fix it as quickly as humanly possible. Right? It needs to work now. Yeah. So this issue of like how long will it take to get it to be as convenient? There's probably two sides of that coin. The reliability needs to get better immediately, right? That has to be something the whole industry focuses on. We're really focused on it, but everybody has to. The ubiquity is the other side of that coin, and I think the having them everywhere is going to take a little longer. Because even if you wanted to start building in some territories now, then you're still 12 to 18 months away from going live.
But 12 to 18 months is...
No, I know that. But then you think about this cycle, and this is my peanut butter and jelly metaphor, right? So when will it be that in Wyoming you have enough EVs to support whatever's already going to be built out with federal fund inducement, and then when do you go the next round? So like when do I think it's everywhere in a way that my parents are like looking at those things? Like
the tipping point.
I think you're probably 10 years away.
Okay,
but
so 2030.
This is not an official company position. It's me saying that's kind of what I think. Well, I think it's a couple cycles here, and I think look, 2023 is a really exciting year because there are finally multiple models of vehicles from multiple manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
This world of I want to buy an EV, and so I've got 5 options from four manufacturers. That's a problem.
No, I mean
for
GM. I want to say is bringing out 11 EVs before 2024. Yeah, something like that.
Like they've already publicly announced, right? You got the Silverado, you've got the Blazer, you've got the Equinox on top of the Bolt, the Hummer, the Lyriq,
all the Cadillac stuff.
Right. It's that when a customer shows up at the lot and they, we have to get beyond where we were when people would say, "Oh, I went to buy an EV and I knew so much more than the dealer." Right? You have to get to the point where it's the dealer is selling multiple models and is super excited about it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Because we kind of picked out 2036 or 35 as that was kind of the name of
that was the name before the name.
Yeah. And
flagrant disrespect for the bell.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And then California kind of
came
out and said 2035. And so it seems like if you're saying 10 years,
fascinating point here, right?
Yeah.
Most vehicles last 10 years, right? So if you're talking about 100% sales in 2035,
I said when the tipping point.
I know, but like that's the kind of thinking we have to do, right? What is the nth ICE vehicle worth? What is the nth barrel of oil worth, right? What happens when we are at 90% EV penetration, and it's not just sales, but VIO. And
it's hard to. I have this conversation with people a lot. People are really freaked out by the 2035 California thing, and I say, look, they haven't even started planning to work on the vehicles that will be sold in 2035. Right. We're not even in that generation yet. You know what I mean? So range anxiety, you might have a 2,000-mile range by 2035 be standard. With solid-state batteries.
You'll be the human slave to Chat GPT AI. So who cares anyway?
Well, that's a very good point.
That goes back to our conversation earlier about standards and the speed of innovation, right? So what happens when we get into solid-state technology? What happens if all the battery chemistries shift? Are you in a world where you've got a 500-mile range car that can charge really quickly? Or frankly, do you need... There's this really interesting conversation. If you have really fast, ubiquitous charging that's convenient and reliable, you don't need a 500-mile range car.
I know.
Right? Again, the bladder conversation. Your bladder is going to limit your road trip.
Right.
So how do we get there as quickly as possible?
Right. No, and
that weight trade-off comes into effect again, too.
Yeah, and again, another conversation I have frequently, it's too expensive for most people, but literally Lucid sells a car with a 500-mile range, 920-volt architecture that charges... it's so
18
quick.
minutes, 20 to 80%.
Yeah, it's insane how fast that thing
but that was the thing that Peter Rawlinson said, because I was like, it's my standard line. It's like, well, nobody needs this much power, or really even this much range. But he was like, agree, in fact, but this is the enabling technology. The next car could have 200 miles of range, charge just as quickly or faster, and be 60% lighter.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So
Americans are irrational about certain emotional decisions and purchases, and that makes sense in a way. It's rational irrationality.
That's how you
right?
sell cars.
That's how you sell cars,
yeah,
right?
That's how you sell cars. Yeah.
The fact that most Americans will never drive from Los Angeles to New York doesn't mean they don't want to know that they can.
Right.
And so the fact that your bladder will limit you doesn't mean that they're ready for that. But at some point, you'll have that kind of the automaker rationality eventually will be, okay, we're going to rationalize we don't need 500 miles of range because that's going to add weight in a way that we don't need it and cost. We can instead sell this really competitive. I think 300 actually is a sweet spot, in part because that's about where ICE vehicles are today. I mean, the little known fact, right? Yes. Gas tanks have been shrinking in an effort to get more fuel economy, and so you actually have this issue with a lot of vehicles where rent a Nissan Versa, right? What's your range on that?
I get into fights with people all the time because I drive an EV, and they go, "What's your range?" And I go, "What's your range?"
I do the
and
same
they
thing.
get so mad. They're like, "Ugh!" And I go, "What? I'm curious. You're asking me. I don't know my range. What's your range?" They get so. One guy almost hit me. He was so mad. He's like, "I'm just asking you a question." I go, "Well, okay, but I want you to think about it. Like, I charge to 70% and I recharge at 20%. My range doesn't matter." But it's just
it's the same conversation about when we talk to we work with Uber and Lyft really closely,
and
look, if you think about electrifying rideshare, they tend to drive at least 3 times more than the average retail driver. So from a climate perspective, huge tailpipe emissions improvement opportunity, and then as well as again you get these ride and drive opportunities. Can
you talk to them about replacing their rear dampers after like so many miles? No, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think that probably just derailed my entire train of thought.
No. You talked to Uber and Lyft.
Yeah. But I forgot what the antecedent to that was.
I was saying range, and you were saying, yeah.
So when we talk to them, they talk about, first of all, they love that they connect with the passengers over talking about the EV instead of just being in silence, because that tends to increase tips. But additionally,
man, if someone talks to me, no tip. But
if you initiated a conversation about EVs, but the point I was making is if you take a 200-mile range car, the first week you're driving it, what we hear from the Uber drivers is, take a 200-mile range car. The first week they're driving it, they're filling it up at 50 or 75, which means they have a 150-mile range car, and then they get comfortable. Right? There's this habituation process that happens with everybody. I think anybody when they first get an EV, they end up developing range confidence in knowing what that car does, knowing where the chargers are. But it's a process, right?
We've talked about this. It might have been Franz from Tesla, but somebody early on at Tesla told us like they because they tell everything you're doing with your car. The first week you get your car, everywhere you go, you plug it in constantly.
Constant top-off charger.
100%. And then you just plug it in at night when you get home. And then you don't plug it in every night. You just plug it in when you need to plug it in. And it takes about 3 weeks of owning an EV to get there.
Or what we've heard from some of our automaker partners is high degrees of intentionality of installing a home L2, but then this waiting period before they get the contractor to show up, they realize that they can trickle and top off with fast charging, and they decide, I don't need to spend the money on the L2. It's not everybody.
My neighbor, he has a plug-in hybrid, and he was like shocked by how long trickle charging takes to charge it, and then I think it's a very typical thing where it's like, yeah, I want to put in an L2. Oh my God, I have to replace my box. Oh, it's a $7,000 install. It's not just like a $700 charger. It's $7,000. And he's just learned to live with it. He's like, you know what? He's like, my commute's 6 miles. Like, I just, I'll burn a little gas if I forget to plug in. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, that's what we're doing at home. Let's because we're running out of time. Let's make this actionable.
Actionable.
Yes. You're the chief commercial officer for a charging network.
Jonathan looks very scared right now.
No. Like just
anticipatory.
Just practical advice. Because I was browsing your site, you got like a whole FAQ on how to charge and this and that. But I want to go a little deeper because you live in a place where that's cold. Let's go from
DC's not that cold.
Well, it's
colder than California.
A little bit.
Let's go from somebody who's still on the fence about buying an EV, and they live in
Chicago.
Okay. We'll do at least 2 places. High density urban environment, but they live in an apartment, so they don't have access. It's a multi-unit dwelling, a MUD, right? They don't have access to a home charger, but they're EV curious. What car are you telling them to buy, or what type of car? Or are you saying, you're probably better off with a plug-in hybrid, or don't bother yet?
No, look, I don't know how you feel about the PHEV side of things. They're a lovely gateway drug, but in my view, I don't think you can replicate the experience of driving pure electric, right? I think 2 drivetrains
and the
is more
people that
complicated.
own them tend to be terrible people.
We own one. And we
I wasn't passing that judgment. But my point is, look, when you switch between a BEV, a PHEV, and an ICE, I don't know how you feel about it, but I always miss the BEV when I'm driving something else because the BEV is so much quicker, it's so much more responsive, it's quieter. Like I feel better when I'm driving it. And there's actually this study years ago of London cabbies.
More superior.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
This is the smog thing, smog and smug thing, right?
Right.
There was a study of London cab drivers a long time ago now where they hooked up these neural thingies to them to test their stress levels. Right. And they found the ones driving EVs had far lower stress levels than the ones driving ICE vehicles because of the noise, because of the emissions, everything.
Well, so, also they can. I've been in electric London cabs. They can shoot gaps like that with confidence. Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit of I'm all in for obvious reasons. I have a bias. But so when people ask me what they should buy, I say don't get a PHEV unless you absolutely have to because you've got a really long commute that you're worried about and you don't have any place that's nearby you, right? The first thing I say to people is open plug share. See if there's more charging near you than you think. If there isn't, maybe then we can have the PHEV conversation.
Interesting.
But if you don't have access to home charging and there's public charging around you, that's a really good option, right? One of my colleagues, until she recently moved and has a place to charge at home now, her weekly shopping was her weekly charge. She went to the same Whole Foods in the East Bay. She did her charging and did her shopping, and that was how she did all of her Bolt charging.
Interesting.
Right? And I think we've talked a lot with California regulators and others about multi-unit dwellings they're a critical path item. Santa Monica actually has a really high percentage of multi-unit dwellings. Mm-hmm. So how do we make sure that we have fast charging as part of the solution in addition to access to L2s where you can do it?
Can I ask you a question? Something I thought up and it hasn't been published yet, but I wrote a thing. I was saying, like there's in California, you have to, if you rent someone an apartment, they have to have heat. They have to have running water. They have to have quiet enjoyment of their property. Is it a bridge too far to say they have to have access to a level 2 charger?
Yeah. Because we just talked about the fact that there's plenty of people that can be fine with a level 1. And plus, one of the things I think gets lost in this conversation is, again, the equity part of this. If you electrify a bunch of parking spaces in a multi-unit dwelling, you're helping the people in those particular parking spaces. In low to moderate income communities, there's a lot of parking on the street. There's not a lot of designated parking spaces. So we can't leave communities behind. We need more public charging for all sorts of use cases. And so I think these different parts of the discussion factor in. Now, buying a car is a very personal decision, right? The vast majority of Americans, as we talked about, don't buy new cars. So what is out there, making sure people know their options. Like, so I'm on the board of Veloz, nonprofit dedicated to increasing EV penetration and awareness. The electricforall.org website is dedicated to what kind of car might you want, right? So body type, price range, range. Like, what are the things you need? So when I talk to people that are thinking about going electric, it's a very personalized conversation of, what are you looking for? What are your concerns, right? I said trying to get people over the hump from PHEV to BEV and that's why there's still this use case for PHEVs, because there's people that need to get over that. Right. Sometimes they could be totally great with a BEV, but they don't want to. So then which car? As long as, to me, when they're over 200 miles of range, they're all fair game. And then it's this question of I'm really impressed with the companies that are now on their second and third because they learn something every time. Right? These models. There's always every car maker goes through challenges on ICE vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, BEVs, where you're going to learn something and make it better the next time. And so I'm constantly impressed when I see these new improvements from GM and Nissan and Hyundai and all these other automakers that are learning from the ones they've done before.
Okay. So let's continue with the actionable advice. I think I know the answer to this, so we'll keep it going. Multi-unit dwelling, you're all BEV. Okay, now let's go to a rural environment.
Yep.
You could put a charger, L1 or L2, at your place, but your commute's long and it's northern, so it's cold.
Yeah. If you're in a place where you're driving 100+ miles a day, there's no workplace charging, and there isn't a lot of public charging around you, that's a great PHEV application.
Okay. But you're still not team ICE at any point?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't we're a one-car family, but if we got a second car, it would be another BEV.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now let's move on to you convinced this person. They own a BEV. They're freaked out about it. They're going on the first road trip. What's the first app they should download?
PlugShare.
Okay. And is there anything else they should download?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is part of the conversation, right? And so, right now, to go on a road trip in the U.S. in a BEV, you're probably going to want accounts or apps or something with multiple networks. right? Now you can use credit cards, but as we talked about, those are not always amazing.
I was going to get there.
We need to get better at all of these things, but in the meantime, there's also, we're working with GM and Toyota to integrate our app functionality into their app, because you already have that app, right?
Right.
So
yes.
we have a thing we call EVgo Inside. It's a suite of APIs that you can do the same functionality in your My Chevy app or your Toyota One app, and so we're working with other automakers on getting that functionality out there so we can make it easier. But right now, I would say download PlugShare, especially because you can, again, plug it in and use Apple CarPlay and Google Android Autoplay, and then download. Go to the PlugShare website, see what chargers you're likely to use, and then make sure you have accounts with those networks.
But this, and Miguel, our colleague Miguel, who you chatted with,
yep.
he told me this might be a question, or at least a path. Your advice, as you just said, is to try not to use your credit card, put your payment information into your phone and pull up wallet, the Apple Wallet.
Well, my advice
use the app.
My advice on our network is to enroll your car in auto charge if you can, so that you can just plug it in and you are good and there.
But I would.
But then separately, you're right. It's the app more than it is the tap, because the tap is still communicating with the credit card processing in a different way than where we have the account, and it's a different type of communication.
Although, can I tell you a funny story?
It's your podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're our guest. No, so somebody told me a long time ago, because one of my things I rage against Electrify America about is I can never even tapping the phone to you can initiate supposedly a payment by tapping the phone, right? So someone said, no, don't do that, and don't use the credit card thing. Open the app, find your charger, and slide it. That's the best way to do it. I was like, okay, great. And then the way they do it is you put money from your credit cards. I had $100 supposedly in my EA account.
Oh, I hate this part of this.
Hang on.
I know.
And then fraudulent activity in my credit card, right? So I got a new credit card, forgot. Yeah, but in my mind, I had $100 on my EA account, and when I wouldn't work, couldn't solve it, and I was just screaming at the wind.
So,
but
just so
use the app to initiate.
So we have the order straight.
And by the way, one of the things that's super interesting is we look at cohorts of drivers, and the early generation customers love RFID cards. They love them because they leave them in the car and it's super convenient. It just bam, bam, bam. The new generation that we've been seeing, this newer cohort, loves the app and auto charge.
Yes.
Right. And that's a really interesting finding that we're seeing and we're tracking.
Okay. So, but just so we get.
But what do you learn from that, real quick?
Well, you learn a little bit about, again, mainstream technology adopters, and the behaviors are going to be different, right? The expectations are different. Maybe it's a younger demographic too, right? The early generation was a lot of older, well-educated, affluent males predominantly.
Right. Yeah.
And now we're seeing it open up demographics, which is great. We need to be available for everybody.
Well, and there was probably some enabling technology or change in usage, right? Like QR codes, right? Nobody used QR codes before the pandemic. Right,
yeah.
and then they popped
menus,
up menus, or the CDC was putting them on your TV, and you're like, I know what I'm supposed to. I see now what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to aim my camera.
Wasn't there a Super Bowl commercial that was just a QR code?
It was like some crypto thing. Yeah.
But to clarify, you get the car, you download the app. In terms of the fastest, smoothest, easiest charge and payment, charge and go process. Use your system if you're using an EVgo, or the number 2 you'd say is the app, which means the wallet, inclusive of
not the wallet, the app, so the EVgo app or the ChargePoint app.
So that's second.
App. And by the way, one of the things that we did do to try and make this a little easier, at least, is we have full interoperability with ChargePoint. So if you go to a ChargePoint charger, you can use your EVgo app or RFID card. If you go to an EVgo charger, you can use a ChargePoint RFID card or app. In part because this was where we thought the industry was going to go, was bilateral interoperability. So we've also done that with some others, and you'll see more of that happening. But it's one of those things where this is sometimes a point of frustration, because obviously the customer wants one thing they can use, right? But we don't make Lyft available in the Uber app and Uber in the Lyft app, right? So it's one of these things of, especially when we all put money and investment into developing the app and these additional functionalities, like it's a challenge, right? So how do we this is the balancing act, right? And this is the theme you've heard me say. There's a lot of work we have to do, and we have to focus on the customer. But we also need to create businesses that are sustainable and scalable. So what's the healthy balance to make this work as a win-win-win for everybody, knowing that it won't be the platonic ideal for everybody, but we can find something that is fantastic.
Okay.
And that's why, again, this plugging charge technology, integrating with the automakers, the technological innovation side is what's going to drive things forward.
I'm disappointed.
I've almost used the name of the show there, but I stopped because of the bell.
I really like using.
Yeah, the bell's got to go.
I like Apple Pay, so
and you can use Apple Pay at our chargers too, but it's one of those things where you're still relying on that credit card reader because you're tapping.
Yeah. See, but that feels there's a.
And I'm not saying don't.
I know there's a positive feedback
to
that that's different from because it's just literally beep, and then it's a positive.
Yeah, for sure. But then the other side of that coin is if you're using your credit card, you're a walk-up customer. We don't know who you are. We can't give you anything extra. We can't give you EVgo rewards where you get some charging credit for the more you use us.
Okay.
And we can't give you a discount. Right? If you want to sign up for a membership, we have a bunch of different types of plans, right? So if you're the type of person that charges once a month, there's a plan for that to get you a discount off the pay-as-you-go rate. If you're using a credit card, by the way, the additional costs on us for credit card processing fees are significant.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we recoup that, right? It's one of those things where it's this challenge, again, balancing the commercial interest and the consumer interest.
Okay.
All right. I have what might be the final question. So, Jonathan, I think you're a terrific guest. What year do we have you back on to talk about some changes that have happened?
I'm just trying to figure out if that means you don't want to see me for a decade.
No, it means I think this is great. I love having conversations like this. I could do this every week. Great. But I'm saying, because a lot of what I've said is you're like, well, this infrastructure time period, things are going to change, technology, industry, government, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Look, if you'll have me on, I'll come back in 2023. But if you're looking for...
No, I'm saying, when do you think
that
we're going to see significant change in the charging industry?
I think the next tipping point is 2 years away.
2 years.
And the reason that it's 2 in my mind is twofold. One is I think that's when you'll start seeing the real results of the federal money. It hasn't really flown, and it's going to take 12 to 18 months to build after the money flows to then really see it in a lot of places.
Biden inflation.
Yeah, $5 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act under Levy, the national EV.
Now, is that because I know $5 billion is a big number, but in terms of like a country, like that's not nearly enough money, right?
So here's this comes back to my point, right? Is it enough money for 2050? And the infrastructure we have there? No.
Yeah.
But is it enough money for now? Absolutely, because it's $5 billion over 5 years.
Okay.
Right, and it's
I don't know.
It's less than $5 billion after you take the haircuts or the administrative side of things.
Well,
but then there's also again
got to get paid.
There's 30C tax credits. There's other incentives that are out there. There are ways that we can keep moving.
And
so my point is, in 2 years, California has a lot of funding out there right
billions.
now. Right.
Yeah.
So in 2 years, you should see some of the fruits of that labor at the same time as this next generation of models, because we talked about, you guys mentioned already, the vehicle development cycles, right?
Yep, 4 years, 8 years really. It's 8 years.
Sure, but some of them have pulled some things forward. And what we've seen is that the literal $1 trillion plus in global automaker investment in electrification, those retoolings, those battery facilities, as those come online and you have more competition and vehicle availability, that's, I think, it's one of the really exciting things. But look, I think 2023 is a really exciting year for vehicles. So I know you've said maybe I'm too positive, which is funny because my wife would tell you I'm a cynic.
Well, let's ask the cynical question. So in 2 years, is it? Are we going to be talking about President Harris in the office, or Trump, or Trump with Vice President Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I mean, now I feel like you're trying to get me not to come back by depressing the hell out of me.
Zing.
No, look, I think one of the things that's, look, I know that you mentioned my political proclivities, but frankly, generally speaking, electrification is totally bipartisan.
Yes.
Right? And especially if you look at where the investments are, there are so many automakers building battery or production facilities in southern states. You have charger manufacturers also popping up in Texas and Illinois and other places. So
wind
it's a win-win.
is the biggest industry in Texas.
Toyota got annihilated for donating to one of the parties when they actually donated to the other party too. Why? Because that's smart business. No matter where you're at.
Well, maybe I have another conversation about some of the folks that.
Yeah. Anyway, but that's
campaign finance reform is a big thing for me.
Yes.
So
but I think that's a great answer. I think 2 years is a really good for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Because also, the supply chain should finally be like really solved. Hopefully, in a few months now. So not only will
one of the challenges last year, beyond all the challenges we know, is if you wanted to buy an EV,
couldn't do it.
You couldn't test drive it.
Yep.
You got on a list, right? So mainstream customers are not okay with that. One of the reasons we went with the Ioniq 5 is we had to go with something we test drove.
By the way, you own an Ioniq 5. Yeah. And it wasn't the one you wanted. You had to get the rear drive because
I wanted the rear wheel drive, but I wanted the higher trim. I wanted the rear wheel drive for that longer range. But the point is, like, when we were coming down to our decisions, it was basically what could we test drive first?
Right.
Because my wife was like, I'm not buying a car.
But what a crazy way to buy a car.
Right?
What a crazy
so, like,
thing. Yeah.
I'll give credit to Polestar. The fact that Polestar will show up at your house for a test drive is a huge selling advantage.
Yeah, they have dealerships, right?
But the bigger, we got one in DC. But the bigger point, I think, is in a world where you can go walk on a lot, see multiple models, be able to drive them, like that will change the game for a lot of people. And in 2 years, you'll have a lot of these off-lease Bolts, off-lease Model 3s, off-lease pick your poison from this year and last year. They'll be entering the used car market. Right. And so you can get to better penetration for people that aren't going to buy a new car.
No, right. And you know, you've been saying, I've been wanting to amend something you've been saying, because you've been saying, well, most Americans buy used cars. Absolutely true. But we still buy 15 million new cars a year. So it's like.
Just we buy 43 million used cars or something.
Yeah, but 15 million is a lot of cars.
The we is also important too, right? Because a lot of the people that buy new cars are buying multiple new cars.
Yeah. Oh,
so
sure.
It's not like the one new car is dispersed. Right.
Fair, however, you know, how do I put this? The super wealthy that buy a lot of Bugattis or whatever, like they're not. Yeah, that's very small numbers. You know.
Sure.
Yeah. But I mean, 15 to 17 million, whatever. I forget what the American market.
I was just making the broader point out. Yeah. Like if we're going to really democratize EV adoption. Yeah, price point matters, but we need to not just be thinking about what's the price point new. It's what's the secondary market value, what's the residual value,
and that's
all those things
and that's
really
tricky right now. Used EVs are very tricky.
We definitely need to have you back on right after President Harris's inauguration ceremony, sometime after. It's fine. The thing that's interesting about me, about you, that I'm making this observation, is that for a guy who worked in government and was across a lot of policies, far-reaching, you know, big idea stuff, you know, climate change, reducing carbon emissions, the whole thing. In the role you are now, it is very clear that you are pro individual or, you know, personal vehicle ownership, right? Not some of the other bigger, you know, solutions around reducing, you know, carbon footprint, which is like, get rid of all the roads. Everybody should have a subway ticket and using, you know, mass transit.
Well, look, I'm hugely supportive of mass transit, and, you know, look, there's two parts of this that are kind of, let's go with interesting as an overused trope. But anytime you say we need to electrify things, you do get somebody saying, well, why don't you just get rid of cars and go to buses, right? And things like that. And it's like, look, we need both of these things. Americans are never going to give up cars entirely, right? It's in our DNA as a car culture.
Right after guns.
Oh man, let's get into that next. That's definitely the next show. But you know, 5 years ago, you couldn't go to a conference without getting hit over the head with ACEs, right? Autonomous, connected, electrified.
Case.
It depends on the Germans said case, the Americans need.
But boy, did autonomous go by the wayside.
But I don't think it's gone yet, right? We're working with autonomous vehicle partners that are electrifying.
It's just further away than we were saying in 2017. Right.
But the reason I share that is I think some of this is we need to make sure we're electrifying for the retail owner. We need to make sure we're electrifying for the rideshare owner, for the fleet, the logistics driver, and for what does go autonomous. Because if you do have autonomous vehicles at scale, the worst case scenario is that they're all internal combustion engine and you have longer exurban commutes in ICE vehicles. Right. And so I think that's a really important part of our business. And so personally, I'm a very much all of the above guy in that way. We do need better public transportation. I think it's kind of sad how bad our trains are in this country. And, you know, we do need to make sure we're electrifying buses. And we're seeing great moves on, you know, some of these companies that are electrifying buses.
Right.
We also need to make sure that people get a chance to drive these awesome EVs. Right. And I think I don't want to give up driving mine. I don't want to be just driven in it.
To that point, though, and this is, again, we can end on this one just because it does.
I got a good ender.
It does sort of speak to the bigger problem. LA, after you've been on them, LA has some great. We had a great subway system that nobody uses. Like it is.
I've ridden the subway here. Yeah,
it is awesome.
I've used it once. It's amazingly
clean,
large,
fast,
clean.
Just
used it once and never.
Cheap.
I've never even thought about using it again. Yeah,
right.
I like my cars.
But it's also great on certain point to points. Like it's when I went to school in Atlanta, which we talked about earlier, one of the challenges with MARTA was that if you wanted to go here to here, you were good. If you wanted to go here to here, no friggin' way without changing and doing and so similar thing. Like when I was in Santa Monica, if I needed to get someplace, I was always going to have to go
through Union Station, right? Yeah,
right.
Which makes it an hour and a half
exactly.
instead of 40 minutes.
And by the way, when most of us talk about trains, we're also talking about the high-speed rail side, the city to city. If you go to Madrid and you want to take the AVE like that, right? When we were in Europe over Christmas, and it was one of those things that was so easy to get from Brussels to Amsterdam. You can't do that in the U.S. quickly.
Yep. All right. I think this might be
this is the last question.
All right. You ready?
We're on the high side several times.
All this stuff we're talking about for you personally, is this fun?
Which part? This interview?
No. I know this is. I know this is what. No.
This actually is.
Yeah. No. I mean, is your job? Because is it fun? Because it sounds like, man, you got a lot of problems in this industry.
Look, there's a
99 problems, and the EVs aren't one. If you know what I'm saying, the cars aren't one.
The cars.
Okay.
The cars have some work. We all have some work to do.
Sure.
Right? It's a collective responsibility. Look, I think a couple of things here. Right? One is I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if there wasn't these twin missions. Right? Like I need to be a part of things that matter.
Okay.
I'm very grateful to be part of a team that feels that way too. Right? The double bottom line thing is real. Like, how do you make sure you're being sustainable, saving the planet, and building a financially profitable business? Those are really important things. Second of all, one of the challenges that we have is there's so much that's beyond our control. What's the utility transformer lead time? Are the automakers getting things out in scale? That's really hard and frustrating. But
now,
what's fun?
Does your background? Because I would just end it all. I mean, I'd hang myself. But does your background in government like prep you for all these unknown unknowns, or I guess unknown knowns? Really, is to use Rumsfeld terminology.
I think my background in government helped teach me how to deal with large bureaucracy and solve things that are first-of-a-kind problems.
Got it. Okay.
And frankly, automakers are large bureaucracies.
Oh, yeah.
And we're all bringing, and utilities are large bureaucracies. So there's a lot of players that we have to work with. The fun part of the job is finding new creative deals and partnerships. Right? Part of EVgo's DNA is inventing stuff in this industry, whether it's on the technology software side or it's on business models. Right? With what we did with General Motors and Maven when they were doing the Maven gig electrification, that was so much fun. What we're doing with some of our autonomous partners, what we're doing with Pilot and GM, these new types of deals, that's what is the most fun to do. And working with people that you care about that are doing something that matters, that's the fun part.
It's probably fun because when you first start, you're just lighting just huge sums of money on fire. Because you're like, what? We don't know where this is going. It might work.
Well, getting more subsidies as they're available is an important part of the bit. Look, you guys laugh, but one of the things that Kathy often, like when Kathy became CEO of EVgo, one of the first things she said is, we're going to bring a discipline of Warren Buffett math. Right? Warren Buffett always says to have a good business, you need a product people want, you need revenues that are increasing and costs that are decreasing. Right? That unit economics focus is really important because there are some folks in this industry that go grant farm and then just don't look at what it's going to cost after the grant runs out. Right. And so we have to say to ourselves, are we being disciplined? Are we thinking about where we're investing our capital in a way that's, again, sustainable? And so that, we started jokingly calling her Kathy Buffett around the office because it was this message she reiterated. That's actually quite important for having the discipline and the culture at EVgo be, we're trying to save the planet. We're trying to do it through a business that makes sense, and we're trying to constantly figure out how can we reduce our costs and how can we increase our revenues.
Nice. Good.
I like that. Warren Buffett mentality.
I don't know if I like that, but I like everything else he said. Yeah.
Okay. So. Well, look, it was awesome. It was a lot.
Wide-ranging, one might say.
Yeah, what's the average length of one of your shows?
Lately, we've been getting here, but normally it's like we're talking to a major celebrity about 700 movies they've been in. So this is good from a walk.
We started out trying to be around 45 minutes, and then went past an hour, and this one just went over 100 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I am not going to compare the views that we get compared to the ones when you've got the celebrities, but I've enjoyed this and hope that we can do this again pre-2027 or whatever we do.
No. Hey, 20. I mean, it was wonderful. Let's do it again.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Jonathan Levy, thank you very much.